I'm Joe Halco, your host, and welcome to another episode of NCSS Here for You. Since 1958, Northwestern Counseling and Support Services has been providing access to high-quality services which promote healthy living and emotional well-being for the residents of Franklin and Grand Isle counties. Over the years, as the needs of the community have changed, so too have the programs and services that we make available to assist children, adolescents, adults, families, and seniors. We take our role in the community seriously and strive to provide a continuum of the highest quality services to meet the needs of individuals who at any point seek assistance with emotional and behavioral challenges, their mental health, substance use, or an intellectual or developmental disability. 2025 marks a milestone for NCSS Here for You, as it's the 20th year that we've produced shows that air highlighting the numerous services provided by NCSS and organizations such as schools that we partner with in the community. Technology devices such as cell phones and computers keep adolescents and kids connected while providing a wealth of information at their fingertips. However, utilizing all types of technology devices can lead to addictive behavior. This month we'll be discussing the effects of social media, internet, and gaming addiction on our youth with my guest, Dr. Harris Strokoff, NCSS's medical director. As a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist, Dr. Strokoff has a front row seat when it comes to recognizing changing behaviors because of the numerous technological platforms that are accessible for our youth to engage in. Dr. Strokoff has been conducting presentations at schools and throughout the community for parents and students to gain a greater understanding of the signs and symptoms of addictive behavior and the impact on mood and social development. The presentation is made possible. This presentation that Dr. Strokoff does is made possible through the generous support and partnership of the Afterglow Foundation. Now to discuss social media, internet, and gaming addiction, I'm pleased to introduce this month's guest, Dr. Harris Strokoff, the Medical Director for NCSS. Dr. Strokoff, it is great to have you here this month.
Thank you so much for having me, Joe.
Well, you know, this is a topic which, of course, when people get immersed in it, there's all sorts of ways that people see this because of the nature of what is their age group, do they have children, don't they have children? There's so much that goes into the lens that someone is looking through. So let's start with the numerous social media platforms that engage these teens and kids daily.
Yes, well, that's a great place to start. And as we know, there are so many different ways that humans engage with media and with technology. And whatever we mention now, there will be many more, probably 6 months from now, a year from now, and especially with the advent of AI, who knows what's next. But you know, when I think of social media, I mean the ones that come to mind are things like Facebook, especially for adults. That's the one that first came about. But certainly many kids now use things like Instagram, Snapchat, and these are social media sites. I can also tell you that for many kids, video games are a social media.
Yes.
It used to be, back in our day, you're playing a video game, you're playing against the computer, and that's it. And now kids log into video games and they are interacting with people they know, they're interacting with people they don't know, and so that certainly falls under the realm of social media. And although I've seen different definitions, technically, a cell phone is not considered social media in and of itself, but certainly group messages, group emails, certainly any parent will tell you that they can be consuming, and they can also cause problems when not monitored.
Yeah, and you make a good point about the cell phone or the computer, but let's just look at the cell phone for a moment and say, with the evolution of the smartphone, which I believe was around 2008, that really was the major game changer when it came to what individuals have in that, the power that they control and have in their hand. Far exceeds when IBM used to have those computers that were the size of this studio. it's just astounding what's at their fingertips and the way that they can garner the information so quickly. I mean, I can remember the days way back when you used to have to go to the library and go through books to do a report and to do all your research. You know, that was the way it was. You know, there was no other opportunity back then. Today, someone can, as you say, and with the assistance of AI and all of that that's on the horizon, almost instantly get all sorts of information within seconds. And what does that do, you know, when you think in terms of a lot of young people who have these devices, and yet the development of their brain has not caught up to what they can experience or be privy to, I guess is a better way to say it.
Yeah, you're right. And look, I mean, these technologies that we're discussing today, they have done and are going to do great good for humanity.
Absolutely.
In many ways. You know, as a physician, already we're finding that obviously using technology and this in AI, both now and in the future, is going to lead to many medical breakthroughs, allowing humans to have better treatment for certain conditions, et cetera. And so there are many positives, and unfortunately, one of the negatives is the degree that basically time spent consuming information or entertainment on one's phone can be detrimental to kids, and mainly what it comes down to is development.
Mm-hmm.
When a human is a child, they go through certain stages. They have certain experiences which shape the type of human that they become, and that includes, for instance, as a young child, bonding with a parent. That includes learning how to make and keep friends, learning how to make eye contact, learning how to self-soothe, learning how to use one's imagination, learning how to form a bond with nature, or form a bond with one's own physical self. And what we're finding is that time spent on screens can interfere with all of the above. And I know we'll probably get to this. Can lead to increased rates of anxiety and depression. And certainly there's many studies that are showing that it can lead to impairment in attention and concentration and academic learning. And so there are many ways that it can interfere. And then that's not to mention the fact that the content that kids can view and consume is almost limitless. And that's I'm a parent. Many of us spend a lot of time trying to find out how to set the parental controls on X, Y, Z, but there's so many that it's really difficult. But I remember one principal told me one time, speaking to parents, it's important to really monitor what your kids are doing, because a child can't unsee something, and kids nowadays can consume content that sometimes can lead to a lasting negative imprint. Sometimes can be traumatic.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot.
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. And I do want to say that I don't want people that are viewing this episode to think that this is meant to just look at all the negativity, because as you said, the internet and social media and even playing a game and all this stuff can be very enjoyable, very positive. There's a lot of great connections that are made. I think the point we're trying to make here today is just the fact that because of the ease at which individuals, and especially young people, have access to this information, it can become overwhelming, and it can, and there's just a lot of potential anxiety, depression, all that type of thing. And that leads me to the question of, when we talk about signs, symptoms, and effects of the internet and gaming addiction, and what parents can look for as those early signs to say, oh, maybe I need to, talk to my adolescent or my kid.
Yeah, that's great. In that list of kind of issues, I left out addiction, so that's a great segue. We certainly see that. I think most of us humans even see that in ourselves. That how often do we need to check email? How often do we need to check text messages? When the phone makes a sound, how often do we need to look down at it? And one thing we know in addiction literature, and myself being a psychiatrist, I've been treating different addictions for the last 15 years or so, is that one thing that holds true is that the younger that someone develops an addiction of any kind, or even is exposed to potentially addictive substances, the harder it is to treat, and the prognosis is more poor. To give an example, comparing 14 or 15-year-olds that start smoking cigarettes compared to, say, 24 or 25-year-olds, the rate of lifetime addiction is way higher in persons who start when they're 14, 15. Same with alcohol, same with any type of drug use. That the longer that you can put off getting that ingrained in your brain circuitry, the better. And what we know, obviously, well, maybe not obviously, what we know is that social media, websites, even before this was on the internet, cable news. These were all, these are all profit driven, and ultimately the way that profit is made is by getting as many eyeballs on these media as possible, and so there are great lengths taken to make websites, to make whether it be a news website or whether it be a social media website. There are great lengths taken to basically make it curated for the person who's looking at it, and to try to keep that person's attention for as long as possible. Same with video games, certainly. If you ever go to San Francisco, you'll see massive $30 million buildings for these video game companies. And that's how they do it. And so we know these things are addictive, and we know that, kids are, if you get someone addicted as a child, they'll be a lifelong user. And so it's certainly something we should be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, and let's talk about the impacts on teens and kids. Three things: their education, their mood, and social development as a result of this.
Absolutely. So first, before we even go there, I want to talk about what signs are of addiction.
Yes.
It's the same signs that we see in addiction to drugs and alcohol we see when it comes to social media and internet. One sign is withdrawal. Someone is not an alcoholic if they can have a beer or two and then not have a beer or two for a couple weeks. Someone is an alcoholic if they need a 6-pack of beer every night, or else they go to great lengths to get it. It's the same with internet video game addiction. So one thing that I ask parents is, what happens if you tell your child to get off the internet? What happens if you put on parental controls? Obviously no kid's going to be happy about it.
Yeah.
But some kids show profound withdrawal, and it can really negatively impact their mood. It can cause problems. That's a sign. Tolerance. Tolerance is something else that we see. To use an alcohol example, a casual drinker can have a drink and feel a certain way. Somebody who's an alcoholic, it may take 6 drinks to feel anything. And it's the same with video game and internet consumption. Does somebody need to be on a screen for 6 to 8 hours in order for them to feel satiated? That's a problem. So rule of thumb is the same types of things. If you're seeing the same types of things from your child when it comes to internet and social media as we see in someone who is abusing substances. That's oftentimes a problem.
So we know there has been a tremendous situation with education and with cell phones being in the classrooms and, laptops, all that sort of thing, iPads. But we're now, and maybe I'm asking this a little sooner than I wanted to, but, here in Vermont, steps have now been taken to alleviate the cell phone situation in the classroom throughout the school day, which is a step in the right direction when it comes to trying to break the addictive behaviors, at least through the school day. Your feelings about what the legislature has done relative to that, and I know that there's got to be a lot of parents as well as kids that are not happy.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So 10 years ago, 20 years ago, if someone were to bring a device that could distract them into a classroom, everyone would say, what are you doing? You can't have that. One thing we noticed is that obviously the pandemic happened and everyone was not going to school and everyone was on a screen. Mm-hmm. And then when kids came back to school, there was a lot of things were pretty lax. And I understand why, because people were just wanting to make sure everyone was okay, taking care of each other. And at the same time, the aforementioned, devices and the content on the devices have become more and more addictive. And one thing that many of us started to notice right away is that people were basically like using devices while they were at school. And even if certain teachers wanted students to fully put them away and not use them, in some ways it was like swimming upstream, because the kids would say, why? I can do it in this other class, or I don't understand what the problem is. I'm just talking to my mom about a ride or something. We never really know what's going on. But luckily this has been studied, and the studies are incredibly clear. And I think that any human who really thinks about it, would probably agree that it is hard enough to pay attention in school and to learn. And you only get 12 years in school, and and the school day is short, and how much time is that class time? And if any of us have the opportunity to be watching The Simpsons or something on their phone at the same time as you're trying to learn, the learning's not going to happen. And so what's really interesting and promising is that when we started doing these talks, I don't think no schools had no states had school cell phone bans. Vermont just passed the law that bans cell phones bell to bell during the school day. Vermont's not alone. By now, there have been about mid-20 states who have done this already, and it's all been in the last year or two. And one thing that's great, especially these days, is it's a completely bipartisan issue. Red states, blue states, senators who are Republican and Democrat are agreeing that this is something that we don't want to have our kids be at higher risk for learning loss and frankly increased risk for disability and not achieving as much as they otherwise should, because we didn't figure this out fast enough. So I mentioned about learning and thinking about academic learning. Just as important is what happens when kids are not in class but at school, and that's the social learning that I mentioned earlier in this conversation. Learning how to make friends, learning how to talk to people, learning how to deal with anxiety with other people. And if kids can just be looking down on their phone, it may help them get through the day, but is it going to help them in their life? Being able to learn how to enjoy things with other people, learning how to accept disappointment, and learning how to treat people, learning how other people are treating other people. So there's all this social learning that is just as important as the academic learning. That thankfully phone use won't interfere with anymore at school.
You also mentioned, about the looking down and everything. And I don't know if studies have been done on the fact of, by age group, people who actually engage by looking at one another in the eyes is on the decline because of what you're mentioning as far as all the screen time.
I don't know of any data, but it certainly doesn't help.
Yeah.
And I'm sure. I mean, there's rates of basically social communication issues are higher than they've ever been, and certainly the pandemic, especially during kids not being able to play with other kids, played a role.
Yeah.
And kids interacting through screens certainly play a role as well.
Yeah. Now, when we talk about going back to cell phones for a moment, the startling impact that those devices have had on depression, cyberbullying, and suicidality as well. Could you talk to that?
Absolutely. One exercise I like to encourage people to do is, especially for people our age who went to school before current times, is I encourage people to think about the most embarrassing thing that happened to them during their school years. Maybe it was middle school, high school. Maybe it was something embarrassing that happened to us. Maybe it was us being bullied. Maybe it was us saying something terrible to something else, because kids are kids.
Yeah.
And think about how that made us feel. And then I encourage people to think about how that would have went down if someone recorded it and shared it with the entire grade, maybe kids from other schools, parents, educators. Maybe it went viral, and how much that would compound the emotional impact that would have on us. And that's what happens now. That's what happens now when kids are filming everything. And so certainly just that example itself, I've seen it as a psychiatrist. I've seen, increases suicidality in kids and teens, increases depression, anxiety, certainly. There are studies, and I know, we'll show a graph of this that, basically adolescent mental health, there was some, in basically studying, rates of teenagers that reported depression and rates of teenagers that reported suicidality. The rates were going down up to a point, and then they started to sharply go up in the mid-2000s. At first glance, when I saw this graph, I was like, oh, that was probably, COVID. But it wasn't. COVID wasn't until 2020. It was really the advent of cell phones, social media, and crystal clear. The studies are clear that rates of depression and suicidality, these are teens reporting that they were having suicidal thoughts and depressed, increased from that time. And it's, you mentioned, cyberbullying. People say and do things online they wouldn't say or do in person, but the impact is still real. Yeah. And sometimes it's even from people that the child or adolescent or adult has never met before. It could be, I've heard people playing video games, and they're some kids playing a video game, and there's somebody they don't know who's saying all sorts of slurs and negative things, and that has an impact. And certainly it can be overt bullying, but but also it can be what we call like fear of missing out, where another thing I encourage people to think about is any teenager or child doesn't get invited to a party or maybe multiple parties or a social event or something, and you maybe hear about it, and that stings, you know. But it's another thing to then you go online and you see all of your friends posting pictures about this, and it looks so great, and then that compounds, you know, the negative feelings of I was left out. So I can give many examples in this respect.
And you know, the thing about the bullying and cyberbullying versus years ago is, you know, that bullying could take place at school or it could take place on a playground or what have you. But it would kind of be contained to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they could call on the phone and that type of thing, but you know what I'm getting at. And now, with the devices at hand, it can be 24/7 and just nonstop. And then to your point, you look at how traumatic that could be to the receiver because it's nonstop.
You're absolutely right. You know, another thing that we see now, and actually this was noticeable at the very beginning, is that certain groups of parents began to understand these issues early on. And actually, you know, like for instance, in Northern California, you know, Silicon Valley, where a lot of these technologies, you know, were born, they were some of the first areas where, you know, some of the wealthier parents would send their kids to private schools without technology. Even today, you know, parents who have understood this, you know, and parents with the ability to do so send their kids to camps, you know, say a sleepaway camp that are screen free,
Mm-hmm.
maybe more involved in nature. You know, certain parents can have their kids be a member of clubs and sports teams where this is not. And what parents have been doing is creating safe spaces from this. So one thing that's wonderful about the schools the state and the schools stepping in and basically saying, we want this to be a safe space that is accessible to all kids, regardless of whether their parents can afford to send them to sleepaway camp or this or that. I think is very commendable.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking a lot about how tech has created depression, but let's also talk about, and I think this is a big one, loneliness, and again, the thoughts of suicide. But, you know, on one hand, we become more connected because of the devices, without question. But on the other hand, we've actually taken a step back and become more disconnected as a society than perhaps ever before. And that's all been born out of all things, technology.
Yeah, you know, this is something I think about a lot. And it's really, when you think about evolution, you think about humans, you know, what humans did socially, really up until very recently. It used to be that social interaction happened every day, no matter what. I mean, you had to go to the store to buy your groceries. You had to talk to people to get something done. You know, there was no other way to go about it. And with that, starting from a young age, kids are socializing and kids are around other people. And what that does is it impacts brain development, and it basically feeds a need that humans have. And humans are not alone. You know, there are many animals that are social animals that you know that require that as well. And what we find now is that, you know, the ability to do things without social interaction, ordering groceries, communicating, you know, and instead of having a conversation with someone where you can have the give and take and maybe some spontaneity can occur, you know, people are sending relatively curated text messages or what have you. That has an impact, and that's something that humans have not evolved and may not evolve to have that be optimal. And so it certainly plays a role. And you know, there's a study that I've cited a number of times that actually showed that and I think this study was done on college kids home from break, but don't quote me on that. But they basically asked college kids, they monitored, you know, how much time are you spending on social media when you're home, when you're on break. And the irony is the more time spent on social media, the less human interaction they had, period. So the less social you are.
Yeah.
And so that speaks to the addictive nature, and also that people are replacing real socialization with interacting with devices. And we don't know how that's going to pan out yet at large for a society. There are signs, and they're frankly not great signs that we're looking at thus far.
When you mention about the on break coming home, and I think about that when we go home on break, you'd really, as much as you could, see all the folks that are your friends who are in that community who you don't typically see or hear from while you're away. And to your point about the more time you spend on social media, and that social media, by the way, could be with those same people, but it's not the same as we are like here in person having a discussion, and all the things that become offshoots when you're talking to somebody in person, as opposed to maybe on a screen, or maybe there's multiple people who are involved in the discussion. So that's an interesting aspect. I mean, the grocery store. What is more common than a grocery store? We all need to buy groceries now. To your point, if you go and you start utilizing platforms where you don't even set foot inside the store, it's just, again, all of those interactions that you can have inside of a grocery store. And I'm not suggesting that it's a party in the grocery store, but think about it. I mean, you might see a friend, you meet somebody new because they're looking for something, or maybe they're reaching for something, can't reach it, you get it for them. Next thing you know, a conversation ensues, and you find out that so-and-so knows so-and-so, and that type of thing. So once again, I think those are the types of things, as you begin to walk away from them, I think where that loneliness can begin to set in. Even though you're connected in a certain way, you're still socially lonelier. And I know that, by the way, from our ex-Surgeon General, is something that he was extremely concerned about when you talk about loneliness. And I'm sorry, Doctor, I know we always think about elderly and loneliness, which rightfully so. But I think now, you kind of look at it, and we got to be looking at young people and loneliness in the same vein.
I agree 100%. In that, you're completely right.
And I just think, that's something like you say, we're monitoring everything. But I certainly hope there's a way in the future that can be broken, because, I don't think there's anything as hard on someone to think that they're all alone, they have no supports, and they've got to go it on their own. And, that can just lead to a lot of thoughts and what have you, where you don't have the balance of being able to talk to somebody about it. So anyway, I just think that that's one of the byproducts that, as we continue to go forward, is gaining more and more inertia, and I'm not so sure a lot of people are really thinking about it, I guess is my point.
Yeah, you're right. And, the COVID pandemic, created a lot of opportunity for things to be studied and for loneliness to be studied.
Yeah.
And many studies that came out of it actually really highlighted the importance of, I forget the technical name, but interactions that some people might not even consider real interactions.
Mm-hmm.
Passing someone on the street, maybe just a nod, paying for your newspaper, something that is something that many people feel like, I don't even really have a relationship with this person. But then you take that away, and it leads to increased loneliness.
Yeah.
Loneliness is one of the top features of depression, of major depression, and certainly suicidality. And even people that aren't alone, they feel alone. And so I just wanted to highlight that, that human interaction is extremely important, and especially in younger people.
Yeah. Now, let's kind of turn the page here, or turn the tables and say, with all this being said, what can be done to reverse the trend? The types of things that we should be looking at that can actually reverse all of this that we've been talking about.
Well, I think it starts with conversations like this. I think much like I think about cigarettes in the 40s and 50s and 60s. The risks and dangers of cigarettes weren't well known.
Yep.
And everybody smoked. And it wasn't until that knowledge was really shared that people realized, like, oh wait, this actually shortens lifespans, and this can lead to suffering. And so this is something that we don't want accessible to our children and younger people. So we're at that moment now. 15 years ago, I don't think people were really worried about this. Because it hasn't evolved to where it is now. But even 5 years ago, there wasn't as much concern as there is now. But we're here, and so thankfully, this knowledge is out there. And so I think having these conversations is important. Just getting parents to think about it. Think about what type of child, what type of adult do I want to raise? Like what do I want my kids to be able to do to be able to control in their own lives. And so I think having these conversations is the first start. I think that one thing that's really important is talking to kids about this. Talking to kids about, like, hey, you're going to middle school. You're going to see lots of kids that are just really consumed with tech. Take a look and kind of see and see if that's what you want for yourself. And again, I'm not a Luddite. I think that most kids are going to play video games. Most kids are going to text each other. Most kids eventually, at a certain age, are going to be on social media. And I think that it's important for parents to feel empowered to be the ones to decide when they want their children to be doing this and to what degree. Is the right answer to basically say, zero technology forever until you're 18, then I've done my job? And probably not. But is the right answer, hey, here's a phone at age 8 and go off and do whatever you're going to do? Neither of those are the right answer. The answer is in the middle, and I encourage parents to really educate themselves and decide where that is. There's a growing movement. This has been going on for years about waiting till 8th grade for cell phones at least. There are. I'm not going to get the details right, but I believe there was a country, I believe it was Australia, that recently said that persons under 16 cannot have social media accounts. There are certain states that have been putting restrictions on social media for teens. And so I encourage parents to do the same. I encourage parents to decide, when does my child really need this, knowing what the risks are. How can I support my children in other ways to make sure that they can socialize and that they can feel a part of things and that they can better themselves. So I think these are, and as I mentioned before, I commend the state of Vermont and the other states in the U.S. that have put these restrictions in the schools as well to basically just decrease the risks for our kids and teens.
Well, yeah, and it's hard enough in the classroom, and especially in a subject that somebody's not that fond of, to learn without any kind of distractions. So, certainly, hopefully this will help in getting kids more engaged in the subject matter. Because, you always want the best for our children. And part of that means they get educated so that they can, once they become adults, they can have a great life. And I think most parents want their kids to do better than them and to achieve more than them. And again, not to pressure them, but whatever it is, whatever walk in life and that type of thing that they're interested in, And it's, I guess, kind of a roundabout way of talking about the fact that you really need to be able to focus as much as you can while you're in the classroom. Because as you said, those, from a standpoint of the 12 years, they go like this. And then if somebody does go on to further education, those go pretty quickly as well. Or maybe somebody's interested in the trades, and those years are going to go quick as well. So making the most of their time and not having or being bombarded with a lot of other ancillary kind of information that's not at the heart of what somebody's trying to teach. And I think part of what we're trying to say today as well, you know, we realize that teachers have a very difficult job. And, you know, they did not go to school to become clinicians and, you know, all that type of thing, and trying to figure out, is their mental health being affected by these devices in the classroom, that sort of thing. You know, they're there to teach subject matter. And the hope is that we can get back to that, and that the children can, again, make the most of the years that they're in school.
Absolutely. And one thing that also is very heartening is that, you know, there are many schools in Vermont that had cell phone bans before this year.
Yeah.
There have been many schools nationwide that have, and many of these have been studied. And the one thing that is pretty common, I think it's pretty common, is that when you tell kids, guess what, you're not going to be allowed to have devices at school, they're unhappy. And what's really interesting and heartening is that you ask them 3 months in, 6 months in, many of them are grateful. Mm-hmm. And that they're like, you know what, this is more fun. This is more, I look forward to school more. I get to engage more. I feel seen and heard more. And so the results are clear. And that's why, again, we went from 0 states to, I forget what the number is, 26 states now in a matter of a year or two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very important. And you're right, you know, to your point earlier about the addiction, that's no different than if somebody is struggling with alcoholism or drug use over a period of time, and it's hard, but, you know, most people will tell you who successfully have taken control of their lives again, they feel 100% better, you know, all the great things in life that they can achieve and look forward to, that maybe they weren't seeing that when they were addicted.
Absolutely.
The digital dementia, I know that's a term that's being thrown around. You know, why is this important for people to understand?
Yes, so that's not it's not a medical diagnosis, but it's a term that's being used more and more, and there's some other terms as well. And basically, what it speaks to is the fact that a couple things. One is that humans are now able to consume so much information in rapid succession and entertainment in rapid succession. Sure. That it's showing that, you know, people that consume more media, it can impact their memory. There are actually some studies underway that compare, like, recall with persons in developed countries like ours who have access to all these devices, and then also people maybe in nations or cultures where they don't have this, and, like, who has better memory. And it does not seem that, you know, consuming, especially, you know, the type of internet that most people consume, it does not seem that helps with things like memory and recall and cognition. Now, again, that being said, I also want to point out, you know, the positives, you know, mm-hmm. that, you know, persons who are motivated to learn and study, you have a library in your hand now. And so this is, none of this is 100%. And also, you know, many people will not become addicted. Many people will not have, you know, overt negative repercussions.
Sure.
But the purpose of this conversation is that many people will.
Yeah. And to be cognizant of it, and that it does happen, and these are some of the reasons why. I mean, it's like anything else, I guess. Certain people are prone to addicted type, whether it's overeating, you know, you can go in any direction you want to. But this is just kind of in the same nature, that certain individuals just can't control themselves when they have that ability to engage. And, I believe you're trying to say is, let's kind of look at those warning signs. Let's see if there's a way we can't get young people to understand that, yes, you can still be engaged, however, not overdo it and be overzealous about it. Because when they get to adulthood, as you have said, we want them to be able to socialize with individuals one-on-one and in groups and in teams. When they get into the workplace, it's that ability, the soft skills to be able to deal with circumstances, because number one, somebody isn't always going to have their particular way of doing things be approved by the people they're working with. They may say, well, that's a good idea, but, and you've got to be able to deal with rejection. You've got to be able to work with a group of people who, in many instances, are looking through lenses that are completely different about the same matter, and come to some kind of compromise on how are we going to go forward with something. And none of that's going to happen if they don't continually hone their soft skills and be able to have compassion for people and, all of those things that a device is not going to give you.
Absolutely. And, and this is off topic a bit, but thinking about what the, what types of jobs are going to be available for kids now.
Yes.
It used to be, you go back 100 years ago and even 50 years ago, that if you have great encyclopedic knowledge, like if you are great at memorizing, you can go really, really far. Well, now with the internet and especially AI, those workers aren't needed. So
Yeah.
what is going to be
Yeah.
useful? It's going to be who can do physical things, but also who can communicate with other humans and explain and have conversations about the importance of X, Y, or Z, about risks and benefits of X, Y, or Z. The communication is key.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's only one way to do that and to hone that, and that's not to be just engaged with a screen. It's dealing with certainly other individuals. Let's talk a little bit about, with all this being said, there's always that peer pressure element to all of this. And that even if someone wants to break an addictive habit, perhaps because of peer pressure, they just can't seem to turn the corner. Any tips or hints on how they can try to continue to move forward in that direction?
That's a great question. Well, one, I think for parents, it's talk to other parents. And one thing that I remember being at a school meeting where a parent basically said, I'm worried about my child going to middle school without a phone, because I don't want them to be the only one without a phone. Because then, would that make them feel less than? And what was great about that meeting is many other parents basically stood up and said, my kid's not going to have a phone.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for one, is just talking to each other and understanding, like, okay, my kid's not going to be the only one. These are some other very good kids, popular kids who also, aren't going to have the same types of things.
Yeah.
And so, kind of understanding that. And then also, again, it comes down to the education. I think having frank conversations with your kids about, like, hey, this is because I want the best for you, and and we'll make sure that you are able to have opportunities to socialize and be able to communicate in certain ways and arrange things. But this is based on what's best. And one thing that's nice is that more and more parents every year are understanding this, and so the pendulum is swinging back for sure. But peer pressure is always tough.
Yeah.
And so that's why when you get to a certain age, it's maybe it's okay. You're ready for texting, this social media, that social media, but there's going to be limits. And really, this is kind of leads to another issue is really empowering parents to parent.
Yeah. Yes.
And empowering parents, like, look, you can't count on anything else to parent your children except for you.
Yeah.
And so, be the parent and set limits. And if kids, break those limits, find a way to deal with it.
And I think one of the things as well is, we have to look at this generationally, because there are parents who didn't have a cell phone when they were young because they weren't available.
Yeah.
And now they're parenting individuals who have them. But then we also have now parents who have had phones when they were at a younger age. So perhaps for them to be able to break that cycle, because they're so entrenched in it, might be a bit more difficult than somebody who's a decade older from that standpoint. So I guess when you look at the different generations, there's another way of looking at the fact this isn't one size fits all by any means in managing this.
You're absolutely right. And also, I encourage parents to also think about when we say phone, usually I have my phone here as a prop. When we say phone, I mean, a phone is not a phone. It's what's on it. And what you could do on an Apple iPhone 1 is not what you can do on an Apple iPhone 14 with all the different social media and everything else that basically creates algorithms literally to get people to click on them as much as possible.
Yeah.
Similar to how playing Super Mario Brothers on a old school Nintendo is different than playing a video game system where people can talk to you and communicate with you in all hours of the night. And you see the same thing in substance use. Drug X, maybe in the 60s, is now lethal in 2022 at a higher degree due to different things. And so I encourage just all parents to really think about like, oh yeah, well I did this. Well, this is different now, and really getting a good understanding of that. And along those lines, it's also, in my opinion, important for us parents to lead by example.
Yeah.
And that's hard because
Sure.
most of us probably look at our phone more than we should, but really being mindful of that and really understanding when it's time to have screen-free time, promoting it, and it doesn't work to say, I want you to be off your screen while the parent is on their screen all the time. That just doesn't work because they see what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're making me think of a recent situation, speaking of the adults, is my wife and I walking into a restaurant, and we sat down, and I just said, take a look around. And you've got groups of 2, groups of 4, 6, whatever, just people dining. But then I said, take a look at how many people within the groups in that are not really paying attention on their phone. And she did and said, holy cow. And I said, therein lies. When you talk about, our behavior transitioning to those that we're trying to raise, they say, well, you do it, or that whole thing. I want to ask one thing, and I think I heard it right, and I think it shows everyone the importance of people understanding what this technology can do. And that is, I do believe I had heard you say once that when it came to all this technology and in the classroom, that the very first school district that eliminated cell phones was in Silicon Valley.
Yep.
And of course, when you say that then conjures up all of these ideas that, geez, you're right, that's the hub of all of this technology. All the companies are based there. And obviously, those individuals that are driving all these products and platforms understand what those can do, and that they would be the first ones to say, let's at least eliminate it from the school day.
Absolutely. And I can tell you that, more affluent parents, even going back 3-4 years ago, even longer, sending kids to schools were not even cell phone bans, but no Chromebooks. Chromebooks are a perfect example. When I say Chromebook, I mean, have kids having access to a computer in
Yeah,
the classroom, which is not banned right now. But many of these companies gave these to schools for free. You know,
Yes.
Look, we care about kids' education here. We want every kid to have this. And at first it's like, oh, great, this is a great equalizer. Well, it turns out it's not equalizing anything, because even kids from the lowest socioeconomic groups have access to the whole of the internet these days. So
Yeah.
but what it is doing is it's creating an opportunity for distraction. You know, sure, there's certain programs you can get on that can be academically helpful. And my understanding from talking to teachers and educators is that you have to have really, and you know, you have to have like entire teams of people trying to monitor and set like, you know, stopgaps on what kids can pull up on these Chromebooks
Yes.
during class and in school. And I'm a psychiatrist. I talk to a lot of people. Kids are very good at being able to look like they're paying attention to class, but really they're looking at car videos
Sure,
or even
sure.
watching a show or something along those lines. And again, it speaks to distraction. You know, none of us would perform as well in school if we had this degree of distraction. And so if I were a betting person, I would say that probably 5 years from now, it's starting now, I can tell you, but 5 years from now, there'll be way less schools that have Chromebooks in their schools, because there's no evidence that I know of that shows that giving a kid a device in the classroom improves learning of any kind. You know, there was another study that I always like to cite, and I saw this was cited in a recent article as well, and it talks about this is a psychological study that on I think it was college kids taking exams. And obviously, you know, they had, you know, one person has their phone on, the other person doesn't have their phone. Of course, the person without their phone is going to do better on the exam. But one thing that's interesting is they also studied the impact of even having one's phone on their desk turned off. And they assured it was turned off the whole time. They did more poorly than someone who didn't have their phone out. And that speaks to just the relationship that humans have with their phone and them thinking about what
Yeah.
might be going on. What do I need to who do I need to text? Who do I need to email? What might be going on this site? Oh, I wish I could check this. And that interfered with the test scores. And so
Wow.
the pull is real.
Wow. As you say, the FOMO effect, which is so very real. Well, Dr. Strokoff, I want to thank you so much for being here this month and exploring this topic. It's certainly a very important one, and one that we hope everybody can get their arms around, and especially in trying to help our educators in making their days go a bit smoother and being able to convey the content that they want to improve the lives of all of our kids.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been great. I appreciate it.
Well, it's been great to have you here. So I do want to thank my guest, Dr. Harris Strokoff, for sharing his insights on social media, internet, and gaming addiction, on our youth and the ways to address this behavior. For those who are struggling, know that you're not alone and that NCSS is here for you at any time, 24 hours a day, through our emergency services number. All you need to do is dial 802-524-6554, then press 1. Or you can also call or text 988. I also want to thank all of our viewers and listeners for spending time with us again this month. You can learn more about all the programs and services by logging on to ncssinc.org. I'm Joe Helko, and I'll be back next month with another episode of NCSS, here for you.